Hey climbers, welcome back to Climb by VSC, a weekly show about building and scaling startups in the world of climate innovation. My name is Jake Kapoor, general partner of VSC Ventures and co-host of Climb. Every week I or a member of our VSC team will speak with the pioneer in the climate tech world about emerging technologies and novel ideas that will turn the tide on climate change. We've all heard enough of the doom and gloom. It's time for stories of purpose-driven innovation that lead to sustainable, positive change. As always, I'm so happy that you've decided to join us. Now let's climb.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Climb, where we bring on company builders and investors that are helping founders in climate and sustainability figure out how to scale. And today I'm excited to have on Shomik Dutta, who is not only an entrepreneur, but also an investor now at Overture VC, early stage venture fund devoted to nurturing climate startups and helping them win government support, which is a unique value add. Dutta also co-founded and sits on the board of Higher Ground Labs venture fund. And before that, had a stint with the Obama administration, serving as an aide in the White House and advisor to the FCC. He was also part of Obama's 2008-2012 campaigns and the transition team. So with that, welcome to the show, Shomik.
Thanks, man. Nice to be here. First time someone's nailed my pronunciation. I've Americanized my name to my own shame, but what you just did is you did it right.
Hey, man, I've been working on a 20-year campaign to go back to Vijay from VJ in college, so I feel you, man. Rebranding is hard. Well, good. So thanks for coming on. I think as we've gone through this journey of finding investors that really are passionate about helping founders, I've really enjoyed our conversations we've had, and also I love the unique aspect of what Overture is bringing to the table. So let's go back first. Tell me about how you got into politics first. Tell me about that experience with Obama, and then we'll get into how that's kind of taken you to where you've gone.
Yeah, you'll appreciate how much my Indian father, my Baba, disapproved of my decision to be in politics. But I really did see it, as kind of trite as it might sound now, as the best way to help the most people. And to this day, I think there's a real honor in being able to serve publicly and being able to do right by lots of folks who don't have as much voice. And I just got very lucky and had this front row seat to Barack Obama's historic 2007 ascent. I joined in the January of 2007 doldrums. I was with him when he announced his presidency in Springfield, and we were kind of a laughingstock. We were down 45 points at one point to Hillary Clinton in the summer of 2007. And it was an experience where I made my closest friends and sort of cemented the conviction that if you believe in something fervently and work like a demon, you can produce extraordinary outcomes. Bill Gates has that great line that everyone overestimates what they can do in 1 year and underestimates what they can do in 10 years. I think the same is true in politics. And if you think in long time horizons, Obama's first campaign took 2 years, 8 years in the White House. When you add those 10 years together, the amount that he was able to accomplish was extraordinary. And so I just, it was the ride of a lifetime. But when you do something like that, you kind of have to move on. Otherwise, you're that old guy that's kind of holding on to the past. And so I reinvented myself, rebranded myself, and fell in love with venture. I fell in love with this sort of 0 to 1 phase. And I've been doing it ever since.
Got it. And tell me about those early days. So Iowa, you guys were there. What does the team look like at that stage? How many people are you there?
Yeah, so I was one of 4 fundraisers when I joined across the country. My turf was the Mid-Atlantic. And, the earliest, there are missionaries and there are mercenaries in every industry. And the thing that I loved most about the early Obama days, it was all missionaries. Everyone was there because they believed in him. No one was there because they wanted to be the ambassador to the UK, and the opponent at the time did have some folks like that. So it was really fun to be able to be with a team that really believed in doing the right things for the right reasons. And actually, climate today kind of reminds me of that. The folks that are paying the most attention, that are most active right now, for the most part, are doing the right things for the right reasons. And there's a certain harmony you can feel in community. And the community I took away, my closest friends in the world today are all Obama 07, 08 folks. And even when you see them in the wild, there's such a sense of trust and love from that experience. And in climate, actually, there's some interesting Obama folks that are now spending a big role. In addition to all of my partners, folks like, Donnie Baird at Block Power are old Obama friends. And so it's fun to be able to root for them.
So let's talk about Overture. So tell me about the fund, where are you guys cutting checks? How big? And like, what's the pitch to founders on the sort of value add?
I heard my friend Ian from Cantos talk about how in venture capital, the customer is the founder. And I love that analogy. And I steal it all the time now. And so apologies to Ian. But it is true that the customer is the founder, and a lot of venture funds feed the customer the same stuff. And I wanted to find a way to combine the things I truly love and find interesting, which is to work with my friends, to invest in climate, and to have a government and political sort of role in the thing we do. And to us, the government's playing the central role, right? Climate is fundamentally a negatively priced externality. It's a mispriced externality. The government's going to play the role of the banker, the referee, and the buyer in a lot of cases. And yet there are no funds that deeply understand the government or what's happening in it. A lot of the founders come from Silicon Valley or from government, or from academia, and are kind of trained to move fast and break things. And this is not, what they think about first, second, third, or fourth. And at the early stage, particularly at the seed, no one really has the bankroll to go hire a $40,000 a month lobbyist. And so that just all represented white space to us. And so what we built was a venture fund that focuses on the early stage, loosely from pre-seed to Series A, writing $1 million checks. And the pitch to founders is invest in us and get a permanent government consigliere team to help you think about what's happening in the government, to be your outsourced government affairs firm at the right time to go identify your insourced government affairs firm, and be someone you can call on, not because you're paying a monthly incremental fee, but because we're on your cap table until you do well. And so that kind of alignment, I think, is really fun. We've been at it for about 1.5 years now, and we're starting to build a tiny brand. And I can't tell you, the most rewarding part, Vijay, is that I'm working with 3 of my best friends that I've known since 2007. One of my co-founders, Brandon Hurlbutt, was the chief of staff at the U.S. Department of Energy. He was an early climate and energy advisor to the president in the White House in the Cabinet Affairs Office. He started the RPE program as the chief of staff. He sat on the investment committee of the loan program, and has since run the most successful government affairs firm in climate called Boundary Stone Partners. And so we've partnered with Boundary Stone, and when we invest, Boundary Stone supports our founders for a full funding round with in-kind services. Another one of my partners, Michael O'Neill, was an early Obama fundraiser, and then worked at Airbnb after the White House on the earliest side of the company, helping out build out their state and local practice. And my other co-founder, Tamim Mourad, is a legendary software entrepreneur who was a financier for Obama. He was a Lebanese guy, went to community college for a year, ultimately went to UCLA and borrowed a little bit of money from his father for his first company, which he returned 1,000x capital to his dad on, and built another subsequent software company for an eye-watering outcome. And so we have this merry band of folks that have known each other since 2007. Some have backgrounds in technology entrepreneurship, others in politics, others in investing. And it's just fun to be able to hammer together when we work.
That's great. And when do these companies need that kind of lobbying support? Have you found any trends? I'm sure it's by subspecialty of what they do, but like if I'm a founder right now and I'm taking $1 million from you, how immediate are those concerns? And just maybe maybe an example or two.
Yeah, I think at every stage it is relevant. And in the same way that CEOs are trained to spend 10% of your time on fundraising, whether you're raising a round or not, and you spend 15% of your time on HR, whether or not you're actively hiring, you need to devote a percentage of your time to government. And it's not a muscle that comes naturally to folks. The timelines are different and often frustrating. A lot of CEOs are planning on a quarterly basis. Stuff in government takes years, as I alluded to on the, not 10 years, hopefully for you, but, it takes on a different time cycle. And so learning sort of what to be considering in your incentive structure and in your time management on government, how to run a stakeholder analysis of who are the stakeholders important to you. If you're building a first of a kind plant, where are you building it? And who are the stakeholders who might have a say in the permitting or in the support of it? I think that matters at the pre-seed, seed, Series A, irrespective of what you're doing. You need to start thinking about it. Now, you may say, look, I'm in incorporation stage and I'm just getting my, N of one, PowerPoint together, and fine, we might not be the right time to engage just yet. But the earlier you engage, the more you're in the ether of decision makers, the better outcomes that we have seen in the past. As an example, we were fortunate to be early investors in a company called Antora. Antora is a thermal storage technology that's decarbonizing industrial heat. Itself a huge driver of emissions. About half of all U.S. electricity is used for industrial processes today. And Thermal storage itself, I mean, the demand for heavy industrial heat is about $140 billion market in North America alone. And so these three Stanford guys came together and built a company to decarbonize industrial heat. And we pitched them cold. I called Andrew, the CEO, cold and pitched ourselves. And they said, no offense, we've got Bill Gates and Chris Sacca about to join our cap table. Why do we need you? And it was fortunate that Boundary Stone actually does some of the public lobbying support for prominent folks, including Bill Gates. And so we got reference checked and we're lucky enough to get included in the round. For Antora specifically, we've built an engagement strategy. We've been, at times, Boundary Stone is engaged in formal lobbying for the company. And we're lucky enough to be able to help Antora find their first government affairs staffer when the time was right. And a guy named Adam Frankel, who's a close friend of ours, who ran government and public policy for Pepsi for a number of years. And so whether or not you're engaging in identifying non-dilutive grant capital, building an engagement map of who should matter for a company, or maybe even specifically hiring the government affairs staffer when the time is right, that's all stuff that we can do to sort of take off a CEO's plate so they can just go hammer on product and go to market and all the other things that they're good at.
Where do you draw the line between this is what's included as being in this deal versus now it sounds like you guys, this company needs to maybe invest with cash or in other ways into additional, like where's that line between what's included and what then ends up being?
BJ, there's nothing I won't do for my founders. I don't know what you're talking about. It's hard, man. No, you're exactly right. And especially for companies like Boundary Stone, that's a business that's used to cash monthly retained clients. And so that can be some of the trickier conversations to have. The, fortunate proof in the pudding, though, is that almost all of our companies have elected to continue working with Boundary Stone on monthly retainment agreements past the first funding round that we throw in as an in-kind. And so that's kind of our demarcation. Okay. We're doing our job.
That makes sense. It's like a lead gen for them, but they kind of provide a little value. That's great. Awesome. Now let's talk about some more things. Politics. Okay. How has it shaped your thinking about growing these companies maybe different than if you just went straight finance or went straight into a startup and then started a fund? Like, what are I know that there's a lot of government relations work in what you're doing, but just maybe more like personality wise, has it shaped the kind of founders you want to back versus others because you've been in that world? Like, tell me about how politics has shaped the founder personality traits. And is that a kind of a way to think about it? Like, has it shaped it?
Well, I'll tell you, the kinds of founders that delight me the most are the deeply technical ones that can zero into your level of understanding and have a great conversation. I keep coming back to Antora. It's one of my favorite companies in the portfolio. The CEO, Andrew, is brilliant and technical and is able to zero into where I am and have a perfect conversation with me without coming across as, patronizing or frustrated. And those kinds of founders, the ability to kind of tune to your frequency is something that I took away from politics. Some of the most talented people we met, guys like Steve Chu is Nobel laureate in physics. He's able to tune to the frequency of the person he's talking to and have a great conversation. And I took a lot of that away from sort of founder conversations that I came to love to have. What I will say generally, though, is that, the ability to shape the sandbox and the rules in which we play, that is the sole jurisdiction of political power. And that's why I think engaging in a political process is so useful and important. When you look at actions like the city of Brookline recently, which banned natural gas connections to new homes, when you look at what hyper-local state action and municipal action is able to do to say to delivery companies, hey, a third of all the zones in our city, for example, in Santa Monica, are now must be delivered to by EV trucks. Imagine what that does to build new markets fast. And so it's not just getting involved on the government affairs side to say, here's my thing. Will you help fund it? Can you get me some non-dilutive grant capital? It's also thinking through all of the state and local actions that can shape markets themselves and define the size of that sandbox. And I think that's the single most underinvested aspect of climate today. I think it is preaching to the already convinced and asking them to get in the game. And so, running hyper-local municipal referendums, for example, building state tables of power and asking voters to jump in and add voice to things that matter. That's a thing that's underinvested in, and a thing I'm really curious to be able to do as a former sort of professional political operative myself. Like at Higher Ground Labs, my last fund, we invest in a lot of political technology startups. And so there is super advanced precision local polling, and you can build coalitions of the willing and go pick a fight. And I think that's a thing that CEOs should be thinking about constantly, because it's an ability to accelerate the market, the TAM itself, and grow it really quickly overnight. When you can't use the fossil fuel cousin at all, that's a compelling way of moving markets fast.
Yeah, no, what you're bringing up is very interesting. It reminds me of something that I learned when I heard from Ali over at Tonal, so fitness hardware company. He said basically, he's like, Vijay, I have 3 companies here. I have a hardware company, a software company, and a brand. It's 3 different businesses. And in climate, it seems like there's at least a company to scale, a story to tell, and a political campaign to run all at the same time, right? And the story could be for investors and customers and all these things, but it's like you have to run multiple businesses in climate, and one of them is policy, right? It's politics.
But the storytelling point is so keen here. It's so interesting the way we are all subjected to so much information overload. You have no idea where a positive impression of a business first germinates. And the ability to tell your story well in the press directly to customers, that's the other huge pain point I see over and again. And so it's cool that I think VSC is like probably a more attractive cousin to Overture, but I'm rooting for you too.
Yeah, look, we're all in the same gang, which is what are the tools needed to be successful, and who can provide them and repeatedly help scale these companies, right? But let me ask you questions now about your process of looking at investments. Can you give not by name, but can you give an example of companies where you're excited about 2 out of 3 things, right? Or 3 out of 4. And what are the most common reasons why maybe Overture doesn't do a deal?
I've learned to become a lot more disciplined on valuation and to understand where we have our limits. We have informal limits in our model, and we try not to breach them too often. But the place where I think I most often get to is if I fall in love with the problem that the founder is trying to solve, having maybe identified that problem already in an investment thesis or otherwise, there's a natural cognitive bias to think that's brilliant. But the problem they're solving and the approach and the founder and the technology must line up perfectly, with the founder being 1A of the most important of all of those over and again. And so I think the deals we've gotten the closest to that I'm glad we walked from are where we resonated with the problem being solved, but the founder, the technology, the go-to-market did not line up. And really, founder comes down to the single most important decision despite everything else. And it's a trite thing to say on a podcast yet again, but it's the founders that are just, the visionaries that you realize are special. Spending time to identify them and investing in them as early as possible is the single best way we've had the good fortune to have success. As an example, I'm a pre-seed investor in a company called Arcadia, run by a friend named Kiran Bhattaraju. I did not know Kiran before investing in the company, but it was on meeting Kiran. The sole basis for my investment was Kiran. And it is today one of the most successful pre-seed investments I've ever made in my life. And it really just comes down to extraordinary founders.
How quickly can you tell on a Zoom who's extraordinary?
It's so hard. I think the hardest thing is that you get caught up in your own biases. We all have appearance biases, group biases, and they're all at work in the back of our heads, tricking us into thinking that someone is special, but it might just be because of the way they appear, that they appeal to some kind of group bias we have or superiority bias we have. And so this is the hardest question. And I don't think I have a perfect answer to this day, apart from having a diverse team that we work with and making sure that diverse team feels the same way that I do.
When you do that, are you doing group calls, or is it like you do the first call, some of these folks talk second to these companies? How do you solve that bias?
I think a lot of it comes down to separation and numbers. And so a lot of it is like ranking founders on paper and not sharing rankings before we then come back and talk about it to see how folks reacted separately, not sharing individual valuation notes on the founder until everyone's had a chance to speak with her or him. That stuff is really important. But this bias question, I'm haunted by. I think we should all be haunted by these biases because they're so deep wired in our, evolutionary DNA. And so I'm not sure we'll ever overcome them fully, because part of the bias is not even wanting to, confront uncomfortable things.
What are you advising your companies on in this current market, right? Where it looks like Series B's and above a little locked up. Is there anything uniquely climate related that you've advised them on? Are you guiding them on besides what, most other generally people talk about saving, conserving, burn, et cetera, but are there any particular nuances you're seeing in climate?
One of our values is focus at Overture, and we try to stick to our knitting on what we really know well. I candidly, Howard Marks has this great article on the futility of prediction. And it's an essay about how we are all terrible macro predictors of things. And so I try to stay far away from it. The place where we are encouraging companies to think about is that this IRA money is about to start flowing. If you qualify for something like 45X, which is a provision for the first time since World War II, the United States government is paying OEMs to make things. Speed and scale are the key during the years where this is going to go the fastest. And so really tuning to the frequencies of where there's funding available today. We have some companies that will turn negative COGS for building hardware because of 45X. They will turn an incremental profit just from having built the thing before they sell it. And so the question is really how to get as much volume together as humanly possible in the coming years that is almost immune to the macro kind of vagaries of the market, given what the IRA represents. And so for those companies, it's a very different conversation. The general bearish sentiment, I think, is interesting as a lay, futile prediction guy that shouldn't even be talking about macro. It does seem like a soft landing is more likely than not right now. You're looking at strong jobs reports, you're looking at strong earnings reports, and increasingly dovish Fed. But those things are hard for me to say with any certainty. It certainly seems the public market bounce has not yet come to venture in growth, but not my area of specialty, candidly.
Yeah, well, tech IPOs had fun for a couple of years there. It probably makes sense to be in the doghouse for a couple more months, but it looks to me on my side like Q1, Q2, Stripe's going to go public. They've already messaged that last January. So I feel like that's going to be the start, even though it's not a climate deal, but we all need bellwethers. And we're seeing non-tech IPOs now, like Kava and others coming out. So it's positive to see. But it's a very good point you make, which is that each industry is different. This IRA is going to provide a lot of opportunities that probably need to be jumped on immediately, and others that can wait longer. How about, where are you seeing next in terms of policy in the U.S.? Do you think we're done now until the next election cycle in terms of new policies that can come to market? Do you see different things happening on the local or regional level? Educate our listeners on what to look out for.
I think the local and state actions are going to be the most interesting things to pay attention to. You're right that legislatively in election season, you can expect almost nothing to get through. I do think permitting reform, which seems to be an area of bipartisan consensus, is very interesting. And the general decoupling from the China supply chain is just a theme that will continue to play out, particularly in semiconductors and solar wafering and other things. But in blue states, I was mentioning this sort of tribe of the already convinced. You have record budget surpluses in blue states and extraordinary climate agendas that are getting pushed through. Overture just had the good pleasure of hosting Governor Hochul for a lunch, the governor of New York in LA, that my partner Michael O'Neill pulled together. And it is just extraordinary how fast they're moving. They have proposed a $30 billion climate budget. The state of California is passing a $54 billion climate budget. The state of Washington has an LCFS program they're instituting. Governor Pritzker in Illinois is moving fast. And those are areas where you can really start understanding manufacturing incentives, where you're going to domicile your manufacturing, playing the different state incentives and municipal incentives, and qualifying for state funding is a whole other sort of turn to this that gets very interesting. And so that's where I would be spending time thinking about. But in the federal government, I think this permitting reform stuff is going to get very interesting. And then a series of executive orders that Biden can pass, things like the defense emergency production stuff he's done on heat pumps can be extended to other areas. And I think that's they're rifle shots that the Biden administration is going to use very smartly, that I think will be interesting to watch. But the central sort of focus of the Biden administration in climate is going to be interpreting and executing on this IRA stuff and making sure money starts flowing quickly.
Yep, makes sense. So I'm going to wind this down with two questions, a couple of questions. One more about your personal journey and things that you've learned. So and then we've got some hot takes, but best advice you were given.
To take your work very seriously and don't take yourself seriously. Okay. I've managed to stay very true to that. I like to have a good time. I like to laugh at myself, and I like to encourage everyone to not take themselves too seriously. There's too much. When folks come at you too seriously, it ruins it for me. I like to laugh.
Okay. And then how about personal? What's your hobbies? What are your passions? If the planet was saved tomorrow,
eating and drinking with my friends is unfortunately my greatest passion and hobby. I love to play poker. I play very competitive poker. I'm a violinist. I'm a concert violinist. I've been playing violin since I was 3. So my buddies and I have a band called Taj and the Mahals. I'm Taj. They're the Mahals. We do weddings.
Dude, are you kidding me?
No, that's
Taj and the Mahals.
My co-founder Michael O'Neill is a very talented guitarist. My buddy Tommy plays guitar. My buddy John plays keyboard.
Did you know I had a band right here called Black Mahal?
Come on.
You can zoom out on it. I don't know if it'll show.
I love it.
Punjabi funk and hip hop.
What do you play?
I'm one of the rappers.
Oh, I love it. Wait, we got to get you. Wait, should we tell the audience a preview of Climate Shot?
Yes, we're having an event September 18th in New York. If anyone listens to this podcast and wants to come to
if you are an Indian or Indian American working in climate, Vijay and I are forming the informal climate mafia right now. And the first rule of climate mafia chat is that we always talk about it on the VSC podcast. So please shoot us an email if you're interested in attending. We've rented out a delicious Indian restaurant on the 18th of September in New York.
And we're getting premium drinks included.
For 2 hours.
All right. So we talked about your political journey to here, Overture, the value add, government policies that are coming through the pike. Let's shift to let's shift to politics for some hot takes. So, dude, we got 2 Desi candidates running right now, Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. What's your
might say 3. What about the Vice President of the United States?
Oh wait, is she running?
No, she's going to be running with Biden. Yeah,
I guess de facto. Yeah. Okay, give me your thoughts on all 3.
I love Kamala Harris. I think she's a once in a generation talent, and the other 2 are not for me. I think I'll give you a hot take. I think that bipartisanship is a joke for the climate folks that are trying to ensure they rip climate out of the national political conversation. It is a failed attempt. It is a useless attempt. I think engaging on the local level is very important on a bipartisan, nonpartisan basis. But the tortured analogy I give, and this might get me in some trouble, is that, you don't see the gun lobby and gun manufacturers going to Democrats trying to cut deals. Democrats want to take guns off the street. And the same is kind of true of climate startups. The Republican Party does not care about climate startups at the national level. On the local level, 65% of all renewable energy projects are happening in red states. Engage away. But I think shying away from partisan activity on the national level is a big mistake, because ultimately Biden's only had 2 years since the IRA has passed. He's going to need a second term in order to get this money out and start it flowing. And the single greatest threat right now to the IRA is a Trump or a DeSantis administration trying to piece it apart. And so finding a way to engage your voice as a climate founder, particularly if you're a climate founder or investor, getting involved in national politics and helping tell stories at the national level to advance political power for Democrats, I think that's a central obligation. I would argue it's a commercial and fiduciary obligation to founders, and understanding how to do it carefully so that you don't piss off your local representatives is important. But that's something that I'm happy to chat with anybody offline or online about anytime.
That's fantastic. And let's talk about that. What are the ways that people should be doing this? So storytelling is one. It's articulating the value that you're providing in the local community, maybe what you're doing for America, what you're doing for the country and the climate. What are the other ways? Are there sort of behind the scenes ways? Is it about donating to certain candidates or what?
Yeah, I think, my co-founder Brandon started a great organization called Clean Energy for America. They have about 6,000 clean energy entrepreneurs that are in association that have built a C3 and a C4 to take political action. I think that's a great organizing first step. I think finding the elected officials in competitive races near you in battleground states and getting involved with their campaigns, helping with fundraising, helping with storytelling. As I mentioned, for the first time in 50 years, we're going to build a lot of things in this country. It's really exciting. There's an economic industrial revolution taking place on the ground with multi-billion-dollar plants being built and next generation jobs coming back to America, and being able to tell that story in vivid ways to voters is going to be an important, channel for us. I think we're at this kind of tipping point right now where you're seeing a lot of pushback on ESG commitments. You're starting to see oil and gas companies tiptoe back from their obligations. You're even seeing rumors at COP that China is starting to walk back its emissions targets without any kind of accountability. And so at these kinds of tipping points, I think it's really important to arm our side with the most energy, the most money, and the best storytelling.
I love that. And let's just get to last question. Biden, how do you feel about his term so far?
I think it's been one of the most impressive presidencies we've seen in modern history. And the amount of things that he's gotten done, the amount of bullets that they've dodged has been extraordinary. And I think that the concerns I have right now are that the Democratic Party has become the party of a lot of affluent, well-educated political operatives, and there's not enough sort of working class focus in the party. And that's something that Biden's changed. Biden has working class roots. The IRA is fundamentally a bill about helping middle and working class Americans access technologies that are just cheaper, faster, better, and decarbonized. And so being able to follow that thread and ensuring that the Democratic Party is focused on working class folks and is not just sort of taken hostage by a bunch of Yale grads, that's a really important thing. And that is a thing to watch in climate too, right? If you ban natural gas connections to homes and make people buy very expensive heat pumps without support, you are very quickly going to lose a huge swath of voters. And so that's an important thing to sort of keep in mind as to why IRA is a lot of carrots, is because if you just use sticks, you're going to lose a huge swath of the electorate.
And how confident are you that his team understands what stories to tell for the campaign?
Their chief storyteller is a guy named Ben LeBolt. He's a very close friend of mine. He's the White House communications director. They are extraordinarily talented. What they need is help with on-the-ground details. So if you are a climate founder or an investor listening to this right now and have specific stories as to how the IRA is going to help create jobs and move faster and not just decarbonize the global economy, but also help create a generation of new jobs for folks that need them, get in touch. We want to hear those stories. The 1 year anniversary is coming up around the corner.
Fantastic. Shomik, we could talk for years. We will be talking. Sounds like there's two Mahal bands that need to be.
Taj and Mahal. As long as you don't try to be a Taj, then you can join. There's only one Taj band.
Yeah. Two Mahals, one Taj. Shomik, thanks for the time today.
Good to see you, brother.
Thank you for joining. If you got to find Shomik, overture.eco. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
Well, that's all for this week's episode of Climb by VSC. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Special thanks to Credo for their help in producing and promoting this episode. To visit any part of today's conversation again, you can find the full transcript on vscventures.com. Our thanks to Josue Ramiro for posting these every week. Lastly, if you've listened this far, please leave us a rating on Spotify or review on iTunes. It only takes a few seconds, really helps us out, and as far as I know, still carbon neutral. Well, that's all for now. We'll see you all next week on Climb by VSC.